Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to continue the discussion that we had 3 years performance of the government. Especially we are going to talk about the economics, which is very important. Remember when Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf took over government 3 years ago. At that time, the Prime Minister and various cabinet ministers invited people to keep track of its promises. Usually, whenever in Pakistan's history you talk about policies or promises, manifestos are usually written and then forgotten after the governments actually take over. But that didn't happen this time, because on one side the government was also taking accountability on its own, and then various media houses also ran trackers. It is amazing that while I talk to you, Dawn Group of Publications, which is a very important Pakistani media house, actually ran a tracker over 3 years. And it actually noticed that out of the total promises, 2 had been completed, but 36 of the promises were on their way. They had been started, or projects had been started, and yet there was only 6 promises that had not yet been opened or started. So today we are going to talk about the economic performance of the government, because the indicators are quite interesting. The government, as it points out, inherited a fiscal and current account deficit, which was huge. Then the government actually kept on facing many challenges like COVID-19 and others. And now, despite that, the country has achieved 2% of growth, and the hope is that it is going to grow faster. The economy is going to grow faster. Before I introduce the guests who are going to discuss it, our team has prepared a report for you. Let us watch that, and then I'm going to actually introduce the panel.
Pandemic, the economy of Pakistan is showing signs of resurgence. Pakistan's economy will grow by 2% in 2021 as COVID 19 restrictions ease. The economic growth of Pakistan is expected to accelerate to 4% in 2022 with improved consumption and investor confidence. Inflation is projected to come down to 8.7% in fiscal year 2021, partly reflecting an expected improvement in food supply, subsidies for wheat and sugar, and closer price monitoring of essential commodities. Due to its impressive growth, Pakistan Stock Exchange earned the title of being the best Asian stock market and fourth best performing market across the world in 2020. Under the Asas Emergency Cash Program, Rs 179.3 billion has been disbursed. Approximately 14.8 million families have benefited from the program. World Bank recognized Asas Emergency Cash Program among top 4 social protection interventions globally in terms of number of people covered. Due to the record increase in remittances inflow, social assistance support from the SARS program, the government's construction package, and a return to pre-COVID mobility levels, the economy has seen resurgence. Investment is also estimated to be recovering as machinery imports and cement sales both recorded double-digit growth rates during this period. Inflows of foreign exchange through the Roshan digital account crossed the $2 billion mark. Pakistan has received $2.75 billion from the International Monetary Fund under its new allocations for member countries to fight against COVID 19 challenges. The Asian Development Bank has approved a $235 million loan to further upgrade the 222-kilometer Shikarpur to Rajanpur section of the National Highway 55 from 2 lanes into a 4-lane carriageway. N55 is part of the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Corridor 5, which links the ports of Karachi and Gwadar in southern Pakistan with national and international economic centers to the north.
Right. Now let me introduce the guest we have, the panel we have. In the studio, I'm joined by Fahim Sardar Saab, who is a senior policy specialist with the National Security Division of Prime Minister's Office. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Also, he's an economist, so I had to qualify the economics part as well. On telephone, although they were supposed to join us on Skype, there seems to be some technical glitch. Dr. Salman Shah, former finance minister, former federal finance minister, also advisor to Chief Minister Punjab. joins us. Dr. Salman Shah Saab, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Dr. Waqar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, also joins us on telephone. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for joining us as well. Let me, because I'm not sure whether the other two guests are at this moment on telephone or they are going to be contacted, because earlier they were on Skype. Let me start with the guest in the studio. Fahim Sardar Saab, government's economic performance so far. Where are you at this moment? How many promises have been fulfilled? One sees a lot of progress in poverty alleviation programs. But when it comes to macroeconomic stabilization, are we there yet?
Thank you very much for having me. As far as macroeconomic stabilization is concerned, that's something that had already been achieved at a certain cost, to be very fair. The cost of reducing demand in one's economy, but at the same time, Pakistan was able to sort of pull back that spiraling fiscal deficit, trade deficit. Now, that had already been done. After the stabilization had been achieved, in approximately the past 8 months or so, the government has been trying to expand the economy through a more through sector stimulus, through basic innovation, through some kind of incentives, sectoral incentives. And of course, as you can clearly see, the interest rates have been brought down. That was one of the biggest problems that this government created for itself, to be very honest. That the government allowed the interest rate to rise from 5.75% to 13.25% in 12 calendar months, which is unprecedented. So that basically burnt out the economy, which was not necessary. Then, unfortunately, there was COVID. As far as stabilization is concerned, that has already been achieved. As far as the attempt to a very aggressive attempt to increase the speed of the economy. The wheel of the economy, so to speak, has to be sped up. The government is working towards that. If you take away the COVID element, if you take away the reluctant basically the COVID restrictions that we reluctantly put in, the government has managed to handle a lot of things. Having said that, inflation has remained an issue.
Inflation, even though the books are showing that perhaps inflation numbers are coming down as well, but you said that stabilization has been achieved. The problem remains of the fiscal deficit, right? And one has to actually talk about that as well. Before I go to the other two guests, let me read two cards for you, which are important because we have to show you what the government is thinking. First one is from Prime Minister Pakistan. Congratulations to NCOC members, SAS team and State Bank of Pakistan for effective response to COVID-19 pandemic, and above all, thanks to the mercy of Allah Almighty. This is very important because you know the context. Recently, The Economist also pointed out that Pakistan is the third best country in terms of return to normalcy during the COVID-19. The second card is, and this is from the Federal Information Minister, if overseas Pakistanis had not sent such a large amount of foreign exchange, the Pakistani economy would have faltered. Today, Pakistanis from all over the world relying on the leadership of Prime Minister Imran Khan are sending foreign exchange and contributing to the country's development. As you noticed in the report as well, a Russian digital account has actually noticed, or it has actually received $2 billion in remittances through that, investment through that. We are going to talk about all these matters further as well. Dr. Salman Shah, if he is with us, let me go to him. Dr. Saab, your take on the government's performance and what are the key milestones that the government has achieved so far?
I think this has been an incredible 3-year period. We have probably never seen something like this in the past 70 years. First, we had a very big threat of bankruptcy because you know that our external indicators were abysmal. We had almost a mountain of debt to service, along with a trade deficit, which was almost $40 billion. And the total financing gap we had was around $30 billion. And we were losing reserves at the rate of $100 million per day. I mean, this was the situation 3 years ago. So the economy was really was shaking. There was investor confidence had disappeared. Our exports were stagnant and coming down. Our window of financing were closed. And in this time period, I think just to avoid bankruptcy is, I would say, the biggest achievement you can think of. And then on top of this whole thing, you had the pandemic. Now we are in the fourth wave, and we are persistently doing better than the rest of the world in managing this pandemic, even though our systems may not be as good as the systems in United States or Europe, but I think we have managed amazingly well. Overseas Pakistanis have been exceptional. We have never seen these kinds of remittances coming into the country, and that has really helped us in two ways. One, in terms of investment, and the other in terms of consumption. So the wheel of the economy were kept going by our overseas Pakistanis. And on top of that, we went through a very rigorous kind of deregulation process, trying to undo 70 years of bad administrative processes, and we were able to revive the construction industry, and that is a story by itself that never in the history of Pakistan has the construction industry been integrated into the official economy, and we have been able to bring housing finance and construction finance as a mainstream financing instruments by the banking industry. We have been able to revive the exports, and exports are doing amazingly well in terms of we are at almost full capacity, and now we are going in for capacity expansion, particularly in the textile area. And all of these things in an environment, in a political environment which was very, very aggressive, and our politics was really not supporting the economic kind of initiatives which one had to take. And under these difficult circumstances, I think the government was able to get things done. The exchange rate mechanism, which has moved on to a market-based mechanism, is really a very, very important reform which has now taken root. And we have been able to stabilize the rupee, and at the same time, we have kept it at a level which is supportive of exports and also for import substitution. Secondly, the interest rates policy is, I think, doing very well. The notion that interest rates have to be, real interest rates have to be positive. In that sense, the State Bank has managed it very well, that during this COVID pandemic, they have still managed to keep interest rates low, albeit that they cover the core inflation and not headline inflation. Inflation was a natural outcome of the major devaluation of the rupee. And this is something which was totally unavoidable because you had external debt and the trade deficit which had to be repaid in dollars,
Right,
and we just didn't have the dollars. So the
right.
adjustment
Dr. Sab,
in the rates had
right.
to have some consequences other than the ones I've talked about. Inflation is one of those consequences, and I think
Right,
that
right.
now.
Dr. Saab, this is very important, and I'm going to come back to you, sir. Do stay with us. Let me bring in the third guest, Dr. Pakar, also joins us on telephone. Dr. Pakar, sir, once again, thank you very much for your precious time. Your opening remark about the performance of Pakistan's economy in last 3 years of PTI government.
Thank you, Farrukh Saab. I think this has been very well covered by Dr. Salman Shah Saab and Fahim Sardar Saab. And there is certainly no doubt that amid the pandemic, there has been an economic recovery. Macroeconomic indicators certainly have stabilized, and there is an uptick in growth. And most of the micro indicators as well within the growth framework are certainly looking very promising. I think because this aspect has been covered by my other two very esteemed colleagues, I think one of the areas where one needs to sort of focus is that most of the success has come on the back of the IMF program. And now, of course, there are some apprehensions in the market that why is it that Pakistan is not again engaging with the IMF or not engaging the way it was previously, and probably not maintaining the same sort of or not committing to the same fiscal discipline, which of course had been agreed under the fund program. That is very closely linked to the government's performance in the other two sectors where, for example, structural reform is direly needed. One is the energy supply chain, and we have seen really a contained growth, but still it is on the upside in the circular debt. And there have been three different plans, energy sector plans for handling the circular debt, but somehow the government hasn't committed to any single of them. And this is a loss which is really continuing to happen. Second, of course, PTI's manifesto commits itself to curbing or curtailing the losses of public sector enterprises, particularly the dozen PSCs which are throwing up over ₹1 trillion rupee in losses every year, you know. But we haven't yet seen that political will to go after, for example, even a single of these PSCs or structure them, or let's say appoint new boards or privatize them altogether, you know. That political will hasn't been seen, and that is reflecting in the fiscal deficit every year as well. My last point on this would be that we have embarked on one of the toughest tax reform agenda, but I think today was a sad day. We have seen our tax team leave today, and I think it had just been around 7 or 8 months that this tax team had been appointed, and one really, it's really a dilemma that why is it that somehow we haven't been able to find a good leadership for the tax reform agenda, or FBR for that matter.
Right. Dr. Saab, since you were talking about the focus or courage to actually go after public sector enterprises, let me ask you, do you think that this altogether privatization business, is it even a possibility in Pakistan? Because whenever we have heard about the possibility of offloading certain assets, we have seen a huge pushback from the opposition or certain quarters in the country.
Yes, first of all, I think this is a very important question, you know, but it's not that we haven't done this in the past. We have carried out substantial amounts of privatization in the past, in the 90s, then in 2000s, you have examples like PTCL, for example, where gradual divestment was done. But, you know, I'm saying that even if you don't want to privatize, there are other ways of really stopping or curtailing this financial hemorrhage which is going on, the government has been thinking of different models such as Sarmaya Pakistan Company, changing the management structure, changing the board structure. So whatever may be the consensus, things should move faster towards that direction, even if that's not privatization.
Right. Earlier, Fahim Sardar Sahab, you were talking about COVID challenge. COVID-19 has been a black swan event, right? True. Out of blue, and True. It has shaken the foundation of world economy. I understand that this time we actually worked diligently and found a way out. But do you think our economy has the endurance and the resilience to actually meet the challenges of another black swan event?
I think that's a tough question because we've already suffered, I think, not one COVIDs, but 4 COVIDs.
Right.
And
fourth wave.
Fourth wave.
Yeah.
And I mean, I sort of classify all of them separately. I do not clump them together because
Right.
the genome is totally different. And as I keep saying that this is a genetic activity. I don't want to get into the details of it. But the point is, Pakistan has shown resilience. Our economy has shown resilience and patience. However, there's a limit to everything. And that's a limit I don't want to test.
Okay.
And I'm hoping against hope. And you see, Pakistan has done marvelously on the COVID front. And I mean, even the United Nations has appreciated this. Even international agencies have appreciated this. However, having said that, we have to understand that there is a limit to everything.
Okay.
And we did those smart lockdowns and everything. This was all data-driven activity. In the first time in the history of Pakistan, you've had the convergence of data on one point, NCOC, that you started off from. And basically, decisions were taken in which very smartly things were locked down. Having said that, every lockdown, every slowdown causes an economic loss.
Okay.
And that has to be not allowed. How do you do that? You basically do that by ensuring the mass health of the mass.
Mass vaccination and
But we also, there's another element which of course you're not perhaps talking about that right now, but I have to mention it.
Please
It is that we have to have an offensive philosophy in our health system, in our economics. I call it offensive economics, offensive health. That we have to go out and kill these bugs before they get to the society. And that only happens when your vaccine machines, when your private sector and public sector are moving together, intertwined in perfect harmony like a clock, and seeking out those bugs and killing them.
There's a reason why I asked you about COVID-19, because we see the growth, but then the numbers about job creation or jobs are not very encouraging.
They're not.
I understand that there has been growth in a certain sector, construction being one of them, and umpteen others. But do we have a handle on job creation at this moment, given that job creation was also PTI's big promise in the manifesto?
It was. And just extending on what actually you've asked, I would further like to ask which other sector are we going to look at? Because let's take 2 steps back. What is the government doing? The government is very intelligently looking at multiplier sectors. Sectors that have a multiplying effect on the economy, on employment, on industry activity, on consumption, and it sort of kicks up the demand in a society. So there is a reason that the government was so keen to push the construction sector. I myself have been involved in the services sector, which also has a very a massive multiplier attached to it.
Right.
Now, when we Pakistanis talk about job creation or job security, I would go so far as to say, because COVID has basically challenged the economic security paradigm of every country in ways they cannot have imagined. It is extremely important that these multiplier sectors are pushed harder than ever.
Okay.
That will create that job creation that you're talking about, and that job creation.
I understand pushing them harder is important.
Sure.
For once, I understand that the consumption-driven sectors or service sector might be easy.
Sure.
But when you're talking about construction, there is a problem. I mean, you have to construct, and then somebody has to buy. that actually ends up with the purchasing power of the common man. If they don't have money, if they have lost jobs, how are they going to, purchase them? So that actually creates a problem, no?
It's a catch-22 situation. Should you wait for the purchasing power to exist for something to be created, or should you create something and wait for demand to sort of catch up to it?
Yeah.
Say's law is that create the supply and demand will follow. Now in Pakistan, to be very honest, we have, our economy is like an iceberg, much deeper than it looks.
Okay.
According to my professional
Are
estimates.
you referring to the informal sector?
Exactly. The informal sector and the undeclared sector, it goes through perhaps 2 to 3 times of what it already is. That's not something I want to bank on. But at the same time, I do not want us to get sort of painted into a corner. We have to go for these projects because there is actually a considerable amount of liquidity within and outside of Pakistan waiting to come into Pakistan.
How do we know that?
We know that because of trends. We know that because of flows. We know that because of the 2 to 3 digit returns that our, for example, real estate sector promises. Our stock market gives 2 digit returns. This is unheard of, by the way.
Right.
So that basically, I'm just giving 2 examples. I know there are more examples.
Yeah.
But I'll just try to wrap it up because our friends have to comment as well. So it is important to just get the activity started, and mega projects have to be pushed through. That basically starts a multiplying effect in various directions, not just in 1 or 2 sectors specifically.
Right. Dr. Salman Shah, the same questions to you, sir. One, the endurance of the economy to withstand another shock like COVID-19. The second is job creation and the unemployment figures that must be worrying a lot of people. Can you comment on both of these, sir?
Yeah, I think, we do have a fragile economy. I mean, we still have a huge debt burden. We still have lots of issues in the energy sector, in various, even in the financial sector, the banking system is not fully geared towards development. But having said that, I think the opportunities are quite immense. I mean, we were talking about construction, you were just talking about that. There is a huge backlog of demand for such things. And if you look at recently we had a development effort in Lahore, where the 13 leading industrial houses have banded together to build almost an entirely new city. And these people are hard-nosed businessmen who are not investing money just for the sake of investment. They are looking at returns. So there is a demand available in the market, which is very important. Secondly, I think the government, this year, the budget, you see the public sector development program has been increased substantially, and on top of it, the provincial annual development program in Punjab, for example, is almost 560 billion rupees, which is a big jump from last year's budget. And along with this, we are also putting in efforts that we can have public-private partnerships even bigger than the public sector development programs. And for that purpose, in Punjab, we are looking at our urban economy and our rural economy, and we have a strategy where every division, we are trying to develop their competitive advantage, and by facilitating private sector investment, in infrastructure through the PPP mode, as well as trying to do something about the energy issues, because Punjab has huge potential for solar energy, and we can now do our own microgrids, and we can provide solar energy to industry and commerce at almost half the price of the going thermal power. So I think there are lots of different initiatives which are taking place with the sole aim of creating economic activity and jobs. We have a youth bulge. We all know that. We have a very rapid rapid urbanization happening in Pakistan. People are moving from the rural sector into the urban sector, which creates a lot of incentives for a different kind of economy, which is much more productive, much more competitive. And we are trying to bring in investment under CPEC. We are bringing investment into our knowledge system. If you look at the Prime Minister's initiative on the technology parks, all of these things are moving very, very rapidly because the infrastructure is being put in place, but it will take maybe another 6 months before things will start showing up in the numbers.
Right.
So in
Dr. Saab,
Faisalabad,
I'm really glad that you mentioned CPEC also, because for quite some time we have been talking about its potential to create jobs, especially special economic zones. Can you also deliberate a bit on the importance of how to actually capitalize on this opportunity, sir?
I think this is very, very critical because in our quest of moving into more value chains other than the traditional value chains we have, China is a big source for us. China has, it's almost like a single window operation where it has the technology, it has the know-how, it has the capital, it has the willingness to invest in Pakistan, and we are kind of strategic partners. And that strategic partnership is now moving into economic partnership. And so if we look at the special economic zones which have been set up, there is a huge amount of interest from China over there, and Chinese companies have even started production in Faisalabad, for example, or in Sargodha, where they have put up a big plant over there. But it's the beginning. I think ultimately we may have at least 1,000 Chinese companies all over Pakistan, because the Chinese find Pakistan to be a place where they can really leverage their technology and create the skilled workforce which is needed. Pakistani workforce is not very skilled at the moment, but it doesn't take too long to impart them those specialized skills which all of these companies need. So I think that it will not be within the next 2 to 3 years that we'll become an industrial powerhouse, but I think we are laying the foundations for rapid industrialization simply because the demographics of Pakistan are such that we have a youth bulge and they are moving into the cities. And the city's economy is the services economy and the manufacturing economy. And that's where the investment will give very, very big returns. And this is now actually happening. It's not something just on the drawing board. It is happening. And in Punjab, we have started with the Gujranwala division, which has a very good basic manufacturing base. In Sialkot, in Gujranwala, in Gujarat, all kinds of SMEs are there. We are trying to bring specialized infrastructure for them, the knowledge base, the testing facilities, ability to trade, enhance the connectivity. And all of these things are, in my mind, these are investment opportunities, and the private sector is fully involved with these activities.
Right. Let me go back to Dr. Bakar. Dr. Bakar, the same two questions. One, about sectorally, about the endurance of the economy to withstand another shock. On the other side, also the matter of job creation. And then, of course, you can also include the CPEC SEZs into the matter as well. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Farrukh Sahab. I think the growth in large-scale manufacturing has certainly laid the foundation for the next couple of months to look good, to create some jobs, to bring back the idle capacity which was there due to COVID system. Having said this, of course, how sustainable this is, that will also be reflective of our domestic policies, such as the energy supply, the energy prices, and the fact that industry is still, of course, demanding that more certain supply and price structure should be offered to large-scale manufacturing enterprises, including the enterprises in the special economic zones, which, of course, are in a much better shape, but require, of course, more expedient processing of connections and scale-up connections. Now, how much Pakistan can benefit from this short window or very narrow window of opportunity which is there? I think we, of course, you're right in connecting this with CPEC, that we need to bring back the momentum which CPEC had in the early harvest phase. We really need to bring back that momentum somehow, of course, due to the transition in the government and then due to COVID, that momentum was, of course, lost. And now I feel that we are banking too much on the Chinese private sector to come in, which already has apprehensions of its own coming out of COVID. Now, all this is actually reflecting into the low volumes of foreign direct investment. FDI hasn't been picking up in recent times, and that is what worries me. And perhaps despite of very proactive effort by the Board of Investment, I must say, still FDI remains an area where more needs to be done.
Right. Dr. Saab, your today's piece, the article you wrote, was about economic situation in Afghanistan and how it affects Pakistan. Before the government fell in Kabul, there was talk of an American-led push for ROZs. Now there is often talk of China investing in Afghanistan and China and Pakistan actually complementing each other. Is there potential in this area as well, sir?
Yes, thank you for pointing this out, Farrukh Saab. I feel there's immense potential over here because whatever happens in Afghanistan, whatever the structure of the government is, Pakistan will remain the shortest route for their bilateral trade and transit trade needs. That's one. Second, of course, under CPEC, if there are projects which can sort of make this transit trade and bilateral trade with Afghanistan more attractive, this could really contribute to future economic growth, at least in the big cities in Afghanistan. And this is what the new administration would need all the more. But I think where I think we need to stress here is that there were some very important regional connectivity projects underway with Afghanistan, which should not be disturbed by this transition. One of them was that both commerce ministries were in touch with each other for revising APTA, which is the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit Trade Agreement, and extending it to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan on their request. This should, of course, not get disturbed. This is in the interest of both countries and the region. Second, there are other transboundary energy projects, such as CASA 1000 in Tapi, which should also go ahead, despite of this short disturbance which is being seen in the region.
Right, that is very important. Now, I understand that there are many things, Fahim Sardar Sahab, that we can talk about. Geoeconomics is one, our ambition and our progress. But let us come back to the micro level, right? Poverty alleviation, the incentives that are there. You pointed out the abysmal condition of healthcare that this government actually inherited, and now it is trying to improve that as well. Where are we at in these sectors?
Health and the poverty alleviation.
Poverty alleviation, yeah.
Okay, I think starting off with poverty alleviation, I think Pakistan once again has done a pretty aggressive, has unrolled a pretty aggressive project.
SAS program?
SAS program, which is now worth 200 and I think 30 billion, if 250 billion something. Now the point is, when you engage in what I would term this as microfinance at the mass level, and very selectively providing microfinance to people, one thing that we can really gain from is if we add a business to it and some conditions to it. If people are given handouts throughout this world, and even the World Bank has done studies on this, and we can do our own studies to establish the similar understandings of the whole situation, that when you give out handouts, you have to attach some kind of conditions to it, so that people do not become dependent on handouts.
I don't know, but these days everybody is talking about UBI, Universal Basic Income.
Absolutely. That is
no condition attached to that.
That's true, but if you look at, for example, many countries that have grown very rapidly in the past 40 years, and one of them is Vietnam. It is micro-level business that pushed up the economy. It's not those mega projects. It's the micro-level business. And since we have the Asas infrastructure, we just need to perhaps calibrate it this year, perhaps, hopefully. I'm praying for it, that we add a few more businesses and conditions to it. You have SMEDA, you have TEFTAs that can basically help that process. Secondly is health. Now, health is, what else can I say? That health is expensive.
Yeah,
now
very expensive. Government has actually brought in its cards, health card.
Absolutely, to facilitate the mass, as it is trying to facilitate people in it through Asas and through targeted subsidies. That's completely understandable. That's the intention of the government. What I'm trying to do is discuss it a little further into the future. That we have to immediately, without any further ado, we have to start with the categorization of our hospitals, A, B, C, D, at the district level, which, by the way, has not been done. Although it's on, I'm talking about plans that exist, so that we start to build up our health and infrastructure. COVID has cost Pakistan at one point more than 2 trillion rupees. So that's what it's going to cost. I mean, if we had any defensive capacities in health, this wouldn't have happened.
It would have been quite useful if we had the kind of data that you're suggesting we have. We should have. But Asas program has been actually collecting data as well.
Absolutely.
Right, and that is good. I'm told that we have run out of time. I have to actually go to the other two and ask them for conclusion. This comment will be the conclusion from your side. Let me ask Dr. Salman Shah. Sir, your conclusion. Dr. Salman Shah Saab is with us. Okay, Dr. Waqar Saab, your conclusion.
Thank you, Farrukh. I think the government would be best advised to really monitor the regional situation at this point and really be mindful of the impacts of this regional situation on the economy. Pakistan has today seen our dollar-denominated bond fall about 1.6%, which is a little concerning, and it's not due to our own doing, it's due to what's happening in the region. Second, of course, there are, of course, challenges on the FATF front, which also the government would need to take care of in the coming days.
Right. I'll take that as a conclusion. I'm told that Dr. Salman Shah left. I will thank him through the screen for his participation. Dr. Waqar Ahmed, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time as well. It is always great having you in the show. Same goes for you, Fahim Sardar sir. Thank you very much for your valuable time and input. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. There are many other aspects of the government's performance and the challenges ahead, but we'll keep on doing programs on that in coming days as well. This was today's show. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.